Luck be a plugin tonight. Luck be a plugin tonight. Hey, all you cool cats, cool WordPress cats, welcome. Thank you, thank you. Good morning, CMS Philly. Let's take a trip. For the next hour, we're going to take a trip to Las Vegas. Imagine you're landing in Vegas for the first time. Bright lights, big city, city never sleeps. You're going to gamble, you're going to party. Las Vegas can be overwhelming. But what does that have to do with WordPress? So for the next few minutes, I'm going to be your tour guide. When you get to the airport, I'm that person that's standing over in the background, waving with the sign. I'm going to show you everything and anything that you need to know about WordPress. Now, the connection between the two, you may be wondering again, what the heck does this have to do with WordPress? When you go to Las Vegas for the first time, it can be overwhelming. There's hundreds of things to do, thousands of things to do, and you want to do them all, but you can really get overwhelmed. So, hello and welcome to WordPress. My name's Joe Simpson. I'm a SiteGround ambassador. I've been in WordPress since 2010. For me, my entry into WordPress was very simple. There was our lead organizer and our CSS goddess. They both left our company at the same time. And they left behind a WordPress site that was done in Headway. For those of you that know Headway or that are familiar with WordPress, that was an old framework, and I immediately jumped out and did my first child theme. 3 years ago, I had a health crisis. I had 2 100% blocked arteries. And at that time, I had fallen out of circulation with WordPress. I had only attended a few WordCamps now and then. But during the next 90 days from when I found out, I took a leave of absence. When I found out I had blockage. In those 3 months, I started attending meetups. I started getting involved as a volunteer in the WordPress community. And those of you who are new to WordPress will find that the community is quite important. And in that 2.5-year period, I hosted 2 WordCamps as a lead organizer. I'm very active in the community. I run a meetup, 2 meetups in Santa Cruz involved with WordPress, and I invite you to join us online. But during the day, I work for Los Angeles County Metropolitan Transportation Authority, that's a lot of words, on their web team, and I manage our WordPress blog network. I speak in the WordPress space. Again, I mentioned I'm a SiteGround ambassador, speaking at WordCamps from WordCamp Europe, WordCamp US, and a lot of spaces in between. So for those of you that are new to WordPress, I want you to join me. But let's talk a little bit about WordPress in general. 36% of the web is built on WordPress, very popular CMS, widely used. WordPress is free and open source, which is incredible as well. It's an awesome CMS system, and WordPress believes that great software should work with minimum setup. So you really can focus on creating your specific story, your product or service. Again, I mentioned I started with Headway a long time ago, and when I jumped back into WordPress, I did it all the way. So with that in mind, let's get started. Don't install anything until you hear this WordPress presentation. This presentation started at a meetup. I always get the same questions, and we're going to talk about those questions in the next hour in hopes to help you out. But who is this presentation for? This presentation is for someone that's new to WordPress or that's just been involved in WordPress for a short period of time, beginners to intermediate level. And these are questions that everyone faces and everyone has to get over in order to have some success with their product. A lot of times people run into dead ends because, again, they get overwhelmed. Plugins are an incredible topic. It's an incredible learning area, but you can be overwhelmed. And we're going to talk about some of the pitfalls, some of the benefits of doing things a certain way. But again, plugins are very unique to your needs. How do you need to use them for your specific case? But again, we'll talk about some best practices that'll help you get started. My slides are going to be available after the presentation at CMS Philly on this bit.ly link as well, Joe Simpson Jr. CMS Philly. I'll leave that up for a second so you can take a look at it and make a note. But again, we'll make this available on the CMS Philly site, as well as I'll tweet it out afterwards. Okay, I'll give you a couple more seconds to write that down. And what I like to do with these slides is I like to have a lot of links. I'm very interactive. This presentation is going to run like our Meetup or our WordCamps. For those of you that are familiar with WordPress, WordCamps are conventions similar to CMS Philly. Meetups, there's official WordPress meetups where we get together, we share topics. It's an interactive experience. It's a learning experience. But one thing we try to make very clear is that we're all sharing. I may know some things, but if I don't know, I'll make sure I know how to get in touch with you and get the answer to you. It's very interactive. It's a very learning experience. All right, so here we go. We've landed in Las Vegas. We're at the slot machine. Lucky 7. Now we're going to switch over to our slides for a while. All right. One of the common questions that you always get at a meetup or as a meetup organizer is, what is a WordPress plugin? A plugin is essentially a bit of code that you plug into your WordPress site. It adds functionality to your website. So when you get the WordPress CMS and you install it, you're good to go to start writing stories. But you have to add additional functionality based on what your client needs. So for example, you can install a plugin to create an e-commerce store. WooCommerce is a very popular selling platform. Or you can install a social network. You can install a forum. You can install a drag and drop page builder that allows you to work on the screen. So plugins add additional functionality to your WordPress site. What does the number 56,104 mean? That's a lot of plugins. This number is updated daily. And as you can see, the number from when I did this initial screen capture to now has gone up. This is the number of plugins that are available to you on the WordPress repository. Now, keep in mind that this is just the plugins that have been vetted and meet WordPress's standard to appear in this repository. But there are also, and these are all free, by the way, there are also thousands upon thousands of premium plugins. And that means they offer a specific set of functionality, but you have to pay for them. They may not be vetted by WordPress, which is also another issue that we could talk about later, but you have over 56,000 options to choose from to add to your site. And the great thing about plugins is that they're created by people like you and me, developers that are out in the space, who have an idea to fix a problem or add additional functionality to their site, and they share it with others. Again, the great thing about the WordPress community. I always like to toss in some quotes that sort of flow along with the ideas that I'm going to present in my topic. So I'd like to share this one by Albert Einstein. Out of clutter, find simplicity. Now, the great thing is, and it's similar to going to Las Vegas or going to the market, there are so many options, but you need to hone in on what you really need in terms of simplicity. How many plugins is too many? This is also a common question. And again, depending on what you need, it's going to vary. But again, we'll talk about a recommended number and why. These are some of the, imagine this is like your slot machine. There are a number of different combinations. These are all some of the most popular plugins. And like a slot machine, depending on the combination you get, it could impact your website. But again, there are thousands upon thousands of plugins for you to choose from. Again, how many is too many? Here are some guidelines to consider. Although there's no set number, too many plugins can slow down your website considerably. And remember, most folks, they give your site a couple of seconds on their phone and then bam, they're gone. So it's really important that you manage the number of plugins that you have so that you can continue to pull those people in and get them to do what you need them to do. Too many plugins can create security vulnerabilities. So the most common cause of a site crash or vulnerability is an outdated plugin. Plugins need to be updated consistently. The WordPress core is updated, and that in fact impacts plugins and vice versa. So you got to make sure your plugins are always updated, because outdated plugins can leave holes that those that are devious and up to no good can jump into and cause havoc and wreak havoc on your site. Various combinations of plugins and code conflicts can cause your site to crash. So again, there are a million different combinations that you can use for your particular site, but these particular combinations can also cause a few problems. So that brings us to our first interactive part of this speech, this presentation. Our first question is, how many is too many? And again, these are what's sort of recommended out in the space. Is it 25 to 50 plugins? Up to 20 plugins? Zero to 5 plugins? Or no limits? I love to live on the edge. Hey, we're in Vegas. We're having a good time. So there's no limits. All right, I'll give you about 15 seconds to answer. All right, and the answer is up to 20. And again, this is on the generous side. I like to stick around 10 to 12 because again, the more you add, in addition to your themes, in addition to the core, you want to make sure you're light and efficient enough to run effectively. Also, your hosting impacts it. Why does WordPress performance with your plugin matter? You know, Google has stated publicly that your site speed is important to how they rank you. Slower pages can be punished. So if you install too many plugins and slow your site down, it can impact how you rank. And again, we all want to be found and we all want to sell or make a conversion. And again, we talked about it earlier, 40% of people abandon the site if it loads, takes more than 3 seconds to load. So again, speed and performance. Again, in e-commerce, up to a 1 second delay in page response can cause a 7% reduction in conversion. So if you're trying to sell, keep your site fast. Use a certain number of plugins and use only the ones you really need. Here's some plugin best practices. Update, update, update. Always keep your core, your theme, and your plugins current. You'll find it in WordPress. Everyone's contributing to these plugins, these themes, the core. So things are always being updated. There's a feature in Jetpack now that will auto update, and I believe it's part of the core as well. So if you set it, it'll automatically update for you. So there's no reason really to not keep things up to date. Now, a lot of times what happens, you may have a development team that likes to make customizations to their plugins, and that way they're really hesitant about updating. But again, remember that you can create vulnerabilities with your site if your plugins aren't updated and current. Use only the plugins you really need. Again, these are really simple things that I'm going to harp on throughout the presentation, but one of the, like for instance, I mentioned the site at the beginning. When I inherited it, it had a whole bunch of plugins that no one used. You know, they tested out and they just left them. Just use the ones you really need. And for those that are just laying around on your site that you're not using, that you tested out and you're not using anymore, or you're just keeping them for some reason, get rid of all unused and inactive plugins. Test all your new plugins before you install them. A lot of folks update plugins live on their production server, which is kind of crazy because again, if there's a conflict or cross conflict between plugins or a conflict between your plugin and the core, your site can crash. And again, you try to use a consistent process. Again, what I try to mention to you, new users, is that it's sort of simple. A lot of these things that I'm mentioning to you, they seem a little basic or a little obvious, Captain Obvious, but remain consistent in how you pick your plugins. Another common question: how do I find the right plugin? Again, there are a number of factors. What's right for you? What's right for your client? Most importantly, what's right for the user? These should all be considerations in picking the right plugin. But once you've decided what you want to add in terms of functionality to your WordPress installation and your WordPress CMS, how do you find it? There are at least three ways. You can do a straight upload to the root of your web server. That's the least recommended, but again, that's a quick way if you're used to going on the back end. You can also use download a plugin from wordpress.org/plugins. And again, I'll show you in a second. And the third one is through your WordPress admin. This is a quick look at the back end of how the WordPress CMS admin looks. Once you log in, over in the left-hand column, you'll see that there's a plugin area, and you go to add plugins, you add new, and then you can see across the top you have a filter bar. The filter bar includes a featured, a popular, a recommended, and favorites area where you can quickly search through some of the things that WordPress, they rank them for you in terms of downloads and a number of different factors that we'll talk about in a few minutes, but also you can search by an author. So for example, in the accessibility space, there's someone that's incredibly knowledgeable, Joe Dolson. If you wanted to search for the plugins that he created, you can enter his name in the search box, or you can search for keywords. If you're looking for an SEO plugin, for example, or an optimization plugin, for example, or a backup plugin, you can enter those terms and you could search on that. If you know the exact name of the plugin, you could search for it that way. And then again, based on what you enter into these filters, the bottom area will update. Once you decide to decide on a plugin, this one, for example, is Jetpack, which is a widely popular plugin. Jetpack is similar to Photoshop, where you have a whole bunch of features bundled in as plugins or filters. Jetpack is a bundle of features that are most popular or commonly used by the average user. So for example, there's a contact form built in, there's statistics built in, there's photo optimization, there's a whole bunch of brute force attack protection. So a whole bunch of things that just by installing this one plugin, it can help your website in a number of different ways in terms of functionality. Some of the things that, and we'll get into it in a second, some of the things that you'll look for. And again, in this view of the admin, you can activate. So you don't have to download or do anything in this way, but you can upload a plugin from here. But you can also just activate it through the admin dashboard. So let's zoom in. These are some of the key things that you need to look for when you're downloading a plugin. You want to make sure that it's updated frequently. So the last updated area. And for this one, for example, I believe it was updated yesterday, as a matter of fact. I had done this slide a little earlier in the week. You want to check out how many active installations. This will tell you whether the plugin's been around and been put through the paces. New plugins are being added all the time. I showed you the number at the top that changed just in the period from when I started this slide deck until this presentation now. It changed over about 100 plugins were added. So new plugins are being added all the time. For example, Jetpack is over 5 million installs. So you know that it's been tried, it's been tested. And another thing to look out for is look at the reviews. Some plugins have very limited reviews. And without that, it's sort of like buying, if you're a car person or if you're a cat person, different accessories. You always want to find out what other people are saying about them. So that's always critical as well. So make sure you look at the reviews as well. The average rating is important. This plugin, for example, gets 4 out of 5 based on a number of different ratings. So you want to be able to see what people think about it and how they rate it as a plugin in general. Also, a key factor is which version of WordPress does it work with? You always want it to work with the most recent version, because again, if you get out of whack in terms of your plugin and WordPress, that can cause more security issues or vulnerabilities on your site. So again, these are pretty standard practices in terms of what to look for, but a lot of times folks hear about a plugin or they read about it on the internet and they immediately install it. But again, come here first and take a quick look and find out what your plugin is all about before you install it. So on the other end, here's a plugin that I just pulled up. And as you can see, there's a yellow bar that says this plugin hasn't been tested in the latest 3 major releases of WordPress. So that gives you a warning signal right off the bat. That means that this plugin isn't actively being updated or possibly worked on. Another thing to look for, you can look down here at the last updated. It was last updated almost a year ago. And as you can see, most importantly, it's only been installed less than 10 times. So not that many people have adopted it or used it or reviewed it. So no one has even reviewed this plugin. So that would be a red flag to me to stay away from it. Again, here's some of the things that we just talked about and how it's a few versions behind in terms of what it's been tested on. And it hasn't been installed that much. Yikes! I would stay. I would stay away from this one, definitely. All right. So again, let's just quickly talk about how to choose a WordPress plugin. Again, you want to see when it was most recently updated. You want to see how many active installations it has, the WordPress version, its average rating, and the reviews and support. Another key thing to think about is that you may have questions about the plugin that you install, and you want to get those answered. One of the tabs in the plugin page is called support. And if you're logged into your WordPress.org account, you can interact with the plugin editor, the plugin authors, and the community, get your questions answered. Because again, the great thing about open source is that everyone's working together to fix things. And you may even know how to fix a plugin and you could submit that change. So there's an active dialogue with every plugin that's out there in the wild, or even in the repository, with people trying to improve them and make them better. So that brings us to our next question. Which plugin is the most downloaded plugin of all time? Akismet. Akismet is a anti-spam plugin that is very useful. It also has some GDPR settings that allow for you to present a privacy page. And you know how when you go to a website, it pops up at the bottom, the cookies alert, and it allows you to opt in or out. Akismet has that built into it. It's right at the top of your plugin admin window. When you jump in there, it's very, very popular. Or Animal Crossing, New Horizons. Actually, my daughter loves to play that, and I like to toss in a weird one. Contact Form 7, which is a very popular, really basic, popular, really functional contact form plugin made by Joe Dolson. Jetpack, again, we talked about that one earlier. Or Yoast SEO, which is an incredibly popular plugin that helps you optimize your site for SEO, search engines, and Google. So we'll give you a few more seconds to decide which one is most downloaded. And again, with a plugin that's downloaded a lot and has a lot of activations, you'll have a trail of information that you can go back and take a look at to decide whether it works for you. And the answer is Jetpack. Jetpack has over 176 million, 176 million views and installations. Actually 176 million downloads. And again, it's a bundle of plugins that add functionality to your website. Another question you'll often get is, how do I publish my own WordPress plugin? Again, plugins are basically a bit of code that adds functionality to your site. So one thing that you'll find as you get more advanced in WordPress is you may not want the 15 features that Jetpack offers. You may want one of the 15. So you can write and enqueue just that functionality in your site. So if you're at that level, which is a little more advanced, and you want to write your own plugin, how do you do that? There's a plugin handbook on WordPress.org that talks about all the steps that it takes to do this, to write your own plugin and have it vetted and add it to the repository. There's a number of steps you go through. There's a team that you work with. There's here's a little closer look at some of the things that they're looking at. Again, if you want to do that. So for example, one plugin that a lot of designers quickly do, which adds bloat to your site, is they immediately go out and grab a plugin that allows them to install Adobe fonts or Google fonts. You can just enqueue that little bit of code in a plugin and activate it without all the extra bloat. You may want to add some Google Analytics tracking code. There's a number of plugins that do that for you. For instance, Monster does that, but they also add a lot of other features that you may not need. So you may want to just create your own plugin to add that specific functionality and keep your site humming. Another question we often get is, how can I do more with WordPress? How do I contribute to WordPress in the plugin area? Here's a Make WordPress, which is also on the Get Involved area of WordPress.org. There are a number of different areas that you can get involved with, from core, accessibility, documentation, themes, even plugins. So if you want to get involved, go to makewordpress.org/plugins, click on the plugins link, and you can get the latest resources. You can interact with a lot of people on the core team involved with plugins. Again, they'll walk you through the process. There's a Make WordPress Plugins blog that includes links to the handbook that I just showed you. You can report your issues. You have a lot of resources to build your plugin, and it talks about the WordPress repository and the directory of information. Another question, hopefully I'm getting you worked up and lathered up and excited to do more with your WordPress site, because again, everything you probably want to do with your site in terms of functionality, someone in the open source community, in the WordPress open source community, has probably done it already. So you want to get out, you want to learn more, you want to learn more about plugins, but how do you do that? Each presentation I do in the various cities, there's a really simple way for you to learn, and it's free, which is also a great thing. At one of your local libraries, and in our city, in Los Angeles, in the Los Angeles area, there are two branches, a county and a city of LA. They both have websites, and they both offer an online area, which has a lot of online resources, as well as lynda.com. So this lynda.com has a lot of great free resources available to you just in WordPress. So there's a whole learning track on how to become a front-end developer, a back-end developer, and there's a whole track of 30 or 40 videos that walk you through from beginner to advanced on a number of ways to learn in WordPress. So for example, I went in and I did a search for WordPress plugins, and it had a number of different learning opportunities for you. And again, you see the URL here. I'll leave it up on screen for a second. And again, these links will be in my slide deck that are available after this presentation. But again, these are some great resources. It shows you related courses. It talks about specific things. So again, if you want to develop a plugin, it walks you through building a plugin from start to finish. And by the end of the tutorial, you'll have the ability to make your own. Excuse me, let me grab a little tea here. What you see here was WordPress TV. WordPress TV, let me see if I can go back. And then jumped off too quick. WordPress TV, all the WordCamp events are recorded, and all the videos are put up on WordPress TV as well as on the WordPress YouTube channel. You can come to WordPress TV and enter in the search box. You can enter plugin, and it'll list all the videos that were done by talented folks in the WordPress community on plugins. And you can take a look at the various topics. And again, they go from beginner to advanced on the development side. So again, this is a great resource for you to learn for free. Again, one theme that I stress, excuse me, one thing that I stress in my meetups or at my WordCamps, and especially to new users, is one mistake that's often made is that you'll get a recommendation on a plugin, you'll find it on YouTube, or you'll go to one of the premium theme or plugin repositories, and you'll immediately buy something, and it'll be over your head. The admin will look weird, or the setup will be a little more advanced, and you won't have time to try it out. So again, I would say use a repository, use these learning tools to find out the basics. Learn how to use those basic plugins, and then do more. Then branch out into premium. And again, you'll learn, you'll advance your skill level, as well as you won't waste a lot of time, because again, you don't want to be overwhelmed. You don't want to run into dead ends in terms of your learning or your projects. A lot of times people will abandon a project because the plugin they wanted to use is too advanced for them, or they don't want to hire somebody to come in and fix it. So again, you want to learn, build up your skills, make a right choice for you based on some of those criteria we talked about earlier. So again, let's summarize for our plugins. Each person has a unique set of needs. And again, your client will dictate that, the user will dictate that, and you'll have some input on it as well. So again, one size may not fit all, but again, you want to stay within certain guidelines because you don't want to impact your performance. Always cover your basics by installing core plugins that support your site security, your site's performance, SEO, and analytics. Those are some things that everyone needs to know. We all want to know how our pages are performing. So you probably need an SEO and analytics tool. You want to make sure that you can rank in certain areas. You want to make sure that your site is fast. So you need some sort of performance tool. You'll probably even need a backup tool. You always want to have backups of everything that you do. Be consistent in how you select your plugins. Again, consistency. I say these things that are boring, but again, just keep it basic. And again, you'll find that all the clutter will move away. Be judicious with your use of plugins. Again, don't overdo it. One site, when our lead developer left, we had a development website, developer.metro.net. And once he left, there were 35 plugins on there. And I had to go in and clean those up. And it was random plugins. There was an e-commerce plugin, a lot of different plugins that people were testing. Don't use your live site as a production area, as a test area. Get rid of all those inactive and unused plugins. Keep your site secure. Here are some popular WordPress plugins. I always like to share these. Like I said, there's over 56,000. So I'm sure I love to hear from you in the chat area. Some of your favorite plugins that you like to use. Again, Classic Editor. Gutenberg is the current editor in WordPress, but Classic Editor allows you to see things from the previous editor's standpoint. Elementor Page Builder is a very popular and fast-growing page builder that allows you to drag and drop live on your screen, which is very powerful. WooCommerce, we talked about that a little earlier. It's excuse me, it's e-commerce tool. WordFence is security. It's a free security tool that's very impressive. The great thing about WordFence is that they're always sending out notifications on the latest vulnerabilities. Their blog is very active. They're very active in the community. That's a great plugin. When the COVID-19 pandemic happened and one of the major WordCamps was canceled, they offered to offset some of the travel costs. So they're very active in the community. They're very knowledgeable about security. It's a great plugin to start with. WordPress Importer, everyone uses that one. When you're shifting from another blog setup to WordPress, you can import your data through the WordPress Importer. So that one's pretty popular, as well as Yoast SEO. So we've had our time in Vegas. We were overwhelmed with the over 56,000 plugins. We talked about the functionality. We talked about the update. We talked about how to get involved. There's so many different ways that you can get involved in WordPress. It's amazing. It's exciting. It's like Vegas. But one thing that's different about WordPress in Vegas, it doesn't have to stay in Vegas. Take this information with you. And again, I hope this beginner's look at plugins helped you out. And I'll leave you with this. Be willing to make room in our lives for the impending birth of our dreams. Open source software is very powerful. In relation to your CMS, it will allow you to build incredible things. It'll allow you to make things that your clients will love, that your users will use and convert to customers. You can join us at our meetup at WordPress SCV. On any of these, we're on WordPress, Facebook, Twitter, and Meetup and Instagram. You can find me at Joe Simpson Jr. at any of these as well, on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, WordPress, Facebook. Thank you, CMS Philly. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. And we'll open it up for questions.